joint committee of the Charter Revision Task Force and Land Use Committee of Community Board 3. And I guess the first thing is you want to call the roll call.
Catherine Freed,
I'm here.
Sean Garcia,
Here.
Nancy Comm, here, Michael Lavario, Sherry Ryan, Damaris Reyes, John Fout, Ariadna Chua here, Alistair Economakis, Herman Hewitt, Trevor, Michelle, Molly, here, Campbell,
Here.
Jaylene, Sandra, Steve, Megan, Anisha.
All right. So we're going to start right in. I'm going to introduce George James. He's an urban planner. Some of you know him because we had used him before on, I think, City of Yes. But the mayor has the Charter Revision Committee, and a number of community boards have already passed resolutions on it. And we've gone in with Board 2 and maybe Board 1 to hire George to give us a presentation of the charter revision and things that we should pay attention to. So George, go right ahead. I can get rid of this.
Great, thank you.
Take the microphone.
Okay, great. It's great to be here.
Are we sharing the screen? I mean, we can see it, but can the people on Zoom see it?
I was told that indeed. they
Yeah,
did.
it's there. It's there.
Ça déconne.
Yeah, it's
Ça
okay.
déconne?
Yes,
Okay.
look up.
Okay,
I don't know.
It's the other side. That one.
But the
No,
Zoom
that's
people
for
on
us.
Zoom might not be able to see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want them to see you?
they don't need to see me.
Okay, so there you go.
Just confirming that they can see the presentation.
Right.
Well,
Again.
if you're sharing,
Yep, I am.
then
You're
you should be able to see.
I thought we stopped you sharing earlier.
Yeah.
All right, well, hold on.
I stopped you so that you could.
Why don't we ask
figure it out.
Let me do that again then.
Can we ask the audience? That would be the easiest.
No, you gotta share it through Zoom.
Yeah,
Okay, you
but
got it.
we-
All right, you go.
All right, I am going to share the presentation. Okay, yeah, that's being shared now. Okay. Full screen. All right. Okay, so there are two charter revision commissions that have been formed and that are ongoing right now. So the mayor has one and the city council has one. If they're separate, they're operating independently. And I think most of you know, but for the public, the city charter defines the rules and how the city operates. ULURP or Uniform Land Use Review Procedure is detailed in the charter, and if you want to make significant changes to it, you form a review commission and develop recommendations for changes to the charter, which likely will appear on the November 2025 ballot. And so why are people interested in this? So real estate and housing interests want to streamline the land use process to make it faster and more predictable. And there is some concern by people who have testified that the current land use process emphasizes local goals over citywide needs. And it's all happening right now. Both commissions have held public hearings and released preliminary reports, the covers of which you can see there. Under state law, if the mayor's commission proposes changes to the charter in a ballot proposal, the council's commission cannot propose changes on the same ballot. And so because of that, we're going to focus in on the mayor's. But I am going to talk a little bit about the council commission because they've come up with some really interesting ideas. Okay, so the Charter Revision Commission is about more than land use, but we're going to mostly talk about land use, but there's elections and voter turnout, procurement and payments, things like that.
Sorry, the screen on the Zoom never changed. They stopped at.
That's so interesting. It's changing on the other side, and I'm hoping
Yeah,
that the
it's
people
changing on that side.
online are seeing a change.
I thought they're seeing
Was
this
it
screen.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to go back over to here. I will stop sharing and then restart. And if I change the screen, only, oh, they both change, okay. I think that will happen if I go full screen.
Maybe a full screen is this.
Huh,
It's the same.
only one changes. That's so interesting.
Hmm.
So I'm going to keep it off full screen. Hopefully people can see it. And that way we can make certain
Yeah.
that everybody sees the same. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, all right, so it's about more than just land use, but we're just gonna focus in on land use today. So during the process hearings, did anybody here participate? Anybody go to any of them? No? All right. They weren't very well attended, but you know, they invited speakers as well as the public to speak. They got couple hundred or in the low hundreds of written testimony. But what they did is they would invite experts to testify first, and they were given more time and to testify. And there was like the Citizens Housing and Planning Council, they would testify early and often, and they wrote very detailed report about what they think about ULURP. The elephant in the room, how ULURP skewed political incentives prevent housing. It's very detailed and it really tells you a viewpoint. But not, you know, they received all kinds of testimony, and the commission's report really detailed. The preliminary report is about the testimony, right? It's not recommendation. It's essentially reporting back what they heard during the testimony and their own thoughts about the process and what they see the problems are. I am not going to be reading to you today, these are the proposed changes to the charter. They didn't do that, right? But essentially they put this 100-page report talking about what they heard and what they see as the problems. There are additional public hearings that have been scheduled. One is tomorrow in the Bronx. The last one in Manhattan is on July 7th. If you want to be involved, you should testify either in person or in writing or both. Okay, so to remind everyone, this is ULURP. This is the process that we currently have right now. I expect that everybody in this room understands it. It describes the process we have to go through, the standard procedure we have to go through for a certain set of land use changes, which are all listed over on the left-hand side in tiny letters, but hopefully you all remember what they are. The preliminary report's the summary of the concerns they heard during the process, but if I'm going to put them into buckets, there are these 7 buckets of ideas that are in there. Fast tracking ULURP, roles within ULURP, categories of projects requiring ULURP, the concept of a zoning administrator, which I'm going to spend a little time on, comprehensive planning, fair housing and the capital plan, member deference, and then modernizing the city map, which I consider a land use action. Okay, so I'm going to go over each one of these relatively quickly, and then I'm going to get into considerations and thoughts for a community board if I sat on a community board. All right, so fast tracking ULURP. So the Mayor's Commission discusses the possible changes to ULURP to reduce process costs and to facilitate certain types of development. It introduces this idea of different levels of review. Large projects take one path, small projects take another. And they've been saying that there are only a few small residential rezonings, like what they call small residential rezonings, Where it's R1 and R1 through R5 now, and it stays R1 through R5, like an R3 to an R5, or less than 40% increase in density. And they say there's only been a few of them, and the commission is blaming, or at least the hearings, the testimony that they heard blames the cost of ULURP on that. And that there would be seen more small rezonings if there was another path. It also suggests streamlining the review of what they call categorically beneficial projects, like 100% affordable housing. I mean, there are certain questions here. What makes a project categorically beneficial? Is it just affordable housing? And then there's also something that, going to a lot of these meetings and seeing local reviews, can local review and ULURP make categorically beneficial projects better? And that's something that's really not talked about very much, but it's a question that I have. As a part of the fast tracking, it introduces this concept of a zoning administrator as a mechanism to review projects that qualify for fast track treatment. Projects that are small, crucial, or categorically beneficial. We're going to talk more about the zoning administrator in a bit. And then it creates different review procedures for fair housing developments in districts that failed to meet their fair housing targets. So right now, you may not know about it unless you've been paying attention to your emails on hearings. There's a fair housing, actually 2 fair housing efforts going on right now. The cities and the fair housing framework, which is the council's fair housing effort. They've already had their hearings, and they're going to be producing draft reports relatively soon. And the council's fair housing framework is going to have housing targets, or reported to have housing targets by community district. And so the idea there is that community districts are not meeting their housing targets, housing developments in those districts may follow a different path. That's what it's suggesting. So the second one is the roles within land use review. And so the commissions are looking at amending the roles played within the ULURP process, including enhancing or otherwise changing the roles of officials like the borough presidents and the speaker of the city council. Consolidating the advisory portion of ULURP from 90 days to 60 days. Moving office space acquisition applications from the CPC to the controller's office so that the CPC isn't reviewing lease renewals for city office space, which I think everybody thinks makes a lot of sense. The new zoning administrator role, which is another official in the process. And then there was a little testimony to suggest there was little testimony to suggest a change in the CB's community board's role in the process. There isn't much. So everybody's saying that the community board's still going to be in the process, but really the thing that may change is the projects that qualify for ULURP, right? So that you may not see as many of the projects as you do now, right? So you still see the projects, but you wouldn't see everything. And the report suggests that a new process for zoning changes that are linked to climate infrastructure and other public land. I mean, this is a quote from it. ULURP's one-size-fits-all procedure forces the city to spend scarce time and resources on exceedingly modest changes. It acknowledges the fact that some city properties are tiny, sometimes inches wide, like we're talking, you could never build a house on it, right? Or anything on it. And to dispose of them, the city needs to go through ULURP, goes through a full ULURP to dispose of an asset that's maybe 8 square feet. And there's a recommendation to streamline disposition to activate public land for affordable housing or other uses, or simply just to get it off the books of the city. This is something I did for another project. And you can barely see them, but there's these tiny little red dots right here. These are all scraps of land that are too small, less than 1,800 square feet, too small for a multifamily housing unit. but they're in city ownership. And it's an amazing thing because the city used to take property for back taxes. It doesn't anymore. It sells these tax liens on them, but it still has all of these properties, these tiny scraps of properties they took for back taxes years ago on the books.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
she just had a question.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, you can interrupt me.
And I was gonna
yeah.
ask you,
Yeah.
so that in our neighborhood,
Yeah.
I see maybe one, maybe two, depending on, I
Yeah.
think it's just one, right?
Yeah, these are the small ones.
I was
tiny
just, I
ones.
couldn't see,
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah, there's not much in CV3, but there's a lot in the city. Yeah, and please interrupt me. It's a small group, like it's a complicated topic.
Thank you.
So number 4 is the zoning administrator office. This was really interesting to me because the zoning administrator was a part of the 1961 zoning recommendations. It was part of that report that became our zoning resolution, but it was never adopted. But they're commonly found in other jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions will have a zoning administrator. I pulled this out of the archives of the American Planning Association that talks about the authority of the zoning administrator and the roles they play in different jurisdictions from 1967. Because it's a relatively common thing. Very often when you have a project that you want to do, one of your first stops in other jurisdictions is to the zoning administrator who helps you through the process in terms of getting your building legal. And the commission described the idea that certain zoning changes would not have a full ULURP, but would instead go to the zoning administrator office. And these, again, are relatively small things, small developments up to 6 units and 35 feet in height, or other small changes or variances, perhaps like a commercial overlay or an extension of a commercial overlay, or parking requirements. A zoning administrator would be in this entirely new mechanism for New York City, and would replace some land use or Board of Standards and Appeals actions. So you wouldn't necessarily have to go to the BSA for your variance, you could go to the zoning administrator. Now, the problem is that the report has no detail on what roles, other than small things. Well, what are small things? The details actually, I think, matter a lot. And also, how would this role impact the community board and the input on this actions? Like, would you still see these applications, right? Or would they just go to the zoning administrator for them to decide and then they would go somewhere, it would never come before you, like an as of right development, right? That never come before you, yeah.
So it would be a part of city planning still?
It did
doesn't
not
say-
say that. It did not say that. It might be
could
right
be a-
now, the Department of Buildings is the agency that enforces the zoning resolution. I could see it as part of the Department of Buildings.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off that, would the zoning administrator be appointed by the mayor or the city council or?
I don't think it said, I don't, it just really introduced the concept and said it would be really helpful, but was a lot light on a lot of the detail, yeah.
So just so that we're clear.
Yeah.
Right, this concept introduction, is on the ballot. And so it would be, if it was voted on and passed, then this is the set of, I guess, this is the guidance that they give as to the role of the zoning administrator, and then it would be up to city officials to interpret that into policy?
Oh, no, okay, so you're gonna get very specific language that will go into the charter.
Okay.
All right, it's going to be very, very specific. The preliminary report is not. The preliminary report is this is what
But I
we
guess
heard.
the question I'm
very far.
asking is,
Yeah.
once it gets to the point of being on the ballot, we'll have all the information we need to make a decision?
Absolutely. You better, because otherwise you shouldn't vote for it if you don't have all the
Right, that's-
decisions or all the information you need to make a decision. I have a question of, would a zoning administrator have the power to hold public hearings, right? If they're doing something discretionary, and you want to speak about it, is it something that they could do? Would they? I don't know. It's again, it would have to be outlined in in the materials. All right, so, number 5, comprehensive planning, fair housing, and the 10-year capital plan. Okay, so the mayor's commission includes language on elevating citywide needs in the land use process, which to me suggests a city plan, right? You know, how do you elevate citywide needs unless you actually have a plan which identify what those needs are? And the commission's report discusses the possibility of a comprehensive plan. And it quoting language introduced by Lander and Reynoso, and it doesn't dismiss it, but it couches it in this very careful language. Like planning is good, but you know, we're New York City, we have all these difficulties doing comprehensive planning. It does talk about examining, imposing fair share housing requirements using models from other jurisdictions. Examines how capital planning process is set out in the charter. That it says that the capital planning process in the charter may need to change to ensure investments in infrastructure are aligned with new housing and rezoning, right? Try to make those things align so that if you have a neighborhood rezoning, you're more directly supporting it with capital for infrastructure, transportation, and neighborhood amenities, which makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the council's report, because I think the council's report on planning fair housing was really good, was really interesting. It has a lot of recommendations to build upon the fair housing framework that they're going through. And they're talking about rewriting the 197A planning process. So right now there's a 197A part of the charter, which allows community boards and other agencies to develop their own plans. It says it's got to be reworked because 197A plans no one's doing them anymore because they don't get approved and they're very expensive and there's lots of barriers to them. But the idea there is to get DCP to help create or assist community boards with 197A plans so that the resources of DCP, which is much better resourced than community boards, can be relied upon to develop those plans. Require agencies, including community boards, to incorporate fair housing and housing targets into their planning process, right? So they're doing all of this fair housing plan, and so make it real by working it into your planning processes. Explore charter amendment to increase the number of votes the CPC needs to approve applications that are disapproved by the community board and the borough president. So if you have borough president voting no and the community board voting no, you have to get a super majority from the CPC to move it forward. At least that idea, which, you know, that makes sense. That's in the council's report. And unless there is a change in state law and there is a bill that's out there, so it could possibly be approved before the end of the session. It does not look likely. And so none of these will be on the November ballot, but they may appear in 2026. So council is putting together recommendations that they plan on getting onto the ballot, not this year, but next year.
Is there any value if a community board does a resolution? Is there any value in saying this is something we would like to see?
Absolutely. And I would say you should do that to both commissions, right? They're both holding hearings. They're both accepting testimony and they're independent. They're not talking to each other. You know, as you might expect with the council and the mayor's office. I would do both. You want to give support to good ideas that you see in the council's plan.
George,
Yeah.
But they are covering the same areas.
Okay,
Same
so
issues.
I would say they have different emphasis. All right, so land use is a big part of both of them. But the council is much more focused in on land use and the mayor's commission goes a little broader with elections and stuff like that.
Are we gonna have access to the slideshow
I will
after the meeting?
Absolutely give it to Susan. I have the
We
links.
already have it.
Yeah,
We always get them.
yeah. The links are hot, so you can click, you can download the. Here it is. Okay, hold on. All right, okay, member deference. Member deference is the idea that land use actions, city council defers to the local council member on all local land use issues. And the mayor's commission identifies member deference as a barrier to development in certain areas and to balancing citywide versus local priorities. Now, member deference is a city council convention, right? It's not a charter mandated process. It's not in the charter, but they spend like 3 pages or 4 pages of their report talking about this and what a problem it is, and they identify all of the few projects that did not have member deference. They go out of their way of saying, look, that's it. That's the only ones that didn't have member deference over the past 30 years. But there are these vague suggestions as to changing the role of the council speaker and the borough president. And the idea there, I think, and this is reading between the lines, all right? This is me reading it like 4 times. Why are they saying this? And that maybe if you increase the power of the borough president and the speaker in the process, maybe you decrease the local council members' sway over in the member deference. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as you said, the last 30 years, because member deference never used to be controlling like it is now. I can think of a number of things that happened, like when I was there in the 90s into the early 2000s, that particularly if the speaker supported something against the member, the vote went against the member.
Right. They talk about Peter Vallone. I think.
Yes, that would be who I was thinking of.
They said things changed after him.
Yes. But I mean, they could easily go back and say it has some impact, but not controlling.
It just doesn't happen though. I mean, that's in the
Yeah.
report, they talk about how there's been one override of member deference in the last decade, and I think it was the
It was
blood
recent.
center rezoning.
Yeah.
And
We should get through the precinct.
I'm sorry.
And that's not even in writing, that's just how the council goes with it.
Right. It is a convention, right? So
Yes.
there's, you can't change the charter to you directly about it, but if you change the process in such a way, it may make it less strong. I think that's what the suggestion is, but it doesn't say that explicitly. Okay, the last one of these is modernizing the city map, and the city map, I don't know how many of you know what it is, but it's essentially this, which has all of the blocks and streets in New York City, and it tells you the exact width of the streets and the blocks, and it also has curb elevations. And due to a number of historical facts, this is all controlled by the borough president's office, and there are different standards by the different boroughs. And we are used to a very data-rich environment that DCP has created in all of their products, and they don't do this one. This is the one that's left with the borough presidents, and some of them still work with paper. It's a kind of crazy, different standards between the different boroughs. And the idea here is to modernize it, is to get it all under a same standard, maybe give it to DCP because they've done good work with the other projects. And then, the idea there is, should all of the city map actions be a ULURP action? Like if you are raising curb elevation because of flood issues, right? You raise the site 3 feet. That's a ULURP action by itself because you are changing the city map. The city map needs to go through ULURP even if you're just changing curb elevations. And I think it's a fair question to say whether curb elevations need to go through the same process as neighborhood rezoning. Okay, those are the 7 buckets. And then I'm just gonna give you some commentary. A lot of this is my opinion here, so take that as you see fit. All right, there's a focus on ULURP time, but ULURP time is small compared to pre-ULURP time. So ULURP is a set time period, 7.5 months, right? So pre-ULURP, before you get a certified application often takes years before ULURP starts. But the pre-ULURP is not dictated by the charter, so you can't make changes to the charter to make that faster. And they acknowledge that. I mean, they say that as much in the report. But they're focusing on ULURP because that's in their control. The ULURP changes cannot have, simply if you shorten ULURP, you cannot materially impact the timing of applications because most of your time is not spent in ULURP, right? You may save 30 days here or 60 days there, but that's all you're going to do. And then finally, planning sometimes takes time. As a planner, sometimes it takes a long time to build consensus over change. Further, I think some of the comments are so general that they're inaccurate. And so, for instance, let me read you something. Today, ULURP frequently requires the same costly multi-year process of environmental and land use review for a new 8-unit apartment building as for an 800-unit apartment building. As such, ULURP applications tend to be for big changes rather than small ones. Now, I see a lot of that. Yes.
I'll save my comment for the end.
Okay. I see a lot of applications, right? And small projects have small application requirements. There are many tiny land use actions. I just pulled out a few here, and the text suggests they cost applicants as much as large actions. They don't. They absolutely do not. So like this one, the top one was for moving a commercial overlay 45 feet. Lincoln Square District Extension, I wrote that. I was the consultant, I wrote the whole thing. I know exactly how much it costs because I got paid to do it. It's the one on the right was for changing parking requirements in a special zoning district. There are differences, right? There are differences. You can sometimes do an environmental assessment as opposed to an environmental impact statement. Yeah.
I frankly take issue with a lot of this. I mean, George, I read the report
Yeah.
just as the same you did, and I don't think the report says that ULURP, it says that oftentimes it takes the same thing, but like some of these ULURP actions, if the Charter Revision Commission's proposals were taken to heed, would not require a ULURP. And I think that the Charter Commission correctly identifies that the exhaustiveness of the 7.5-month ULURP process is oftentimes what informs the length of the pre-ULURP process. And I think that you're divorcing those two things is disingenuous. Like, we spend 5 years getting a pre-ULURP application together because we're so afraid of the 7.5-month blitz process of a ULURP. Like, those two things are fundamentally linked. If the ULURP process were streamlined and enhanced, those pre-ULURP times would necessarily go down.
All right, so can I? All right, I want us to be mindful that George is just analyzing what he saw, and I think that, please, you have your time, let me finish. And I think he's presenting a very fair, not very biased opinion of, I was gonna ask him his opinion because there are things I don't really know what his opinion is on because I thought it was pretty unbiased, but how much more do we have to go?
We're almost done, so there's like 6 more slides.
All right, we can get to that, let's just finish this out.
All right, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I will respond, but I'll finish. And there's no discussion of, there's talk about if you have small projects, you have a different timeline. There's no discussion of increasing review time for very large projects, right? So neighborhood rezonings get the same amount of time as an extension of a commercial overlay right now, right? It's like you have tiny little things that are de minimis, have the exact same amount of time as like a neighborhood changing rezoning. City of Yes for Housing Opportunity was a non-ULURP action. It could have taken more time, but they still followed the same land use timeline as ULURP. That was 1,386 pages of zoning text, right? It was enormous. And it had the same amount of time as everything else. And in my humble opinion, it could have used a longer review time. The commission is focusing up on speeding the projects, especially for small projects. Well, for me, it's like, what about the large project? And also, I'm going to say, in terms of the mayor's report, it shows, I think, little appreciation for how projects can improve because of local input during the process. I think there's real value for community boards and their review process, and projects get better because of it. Not all of them, but some do. There is a long discussion of member deference. I think we've already talked about this. I'll skip to the next. There's a focus on impediments to small projects, and City of Yes for Housing Opportunity largely eliminates this issue in the R1 through R5 districts, because essentially it allows for up to R5 zoning in the low density districts. And so, there's a question of, is this focus still necessary? Is this comment still accurate? And I think understanding the zoning administrator role, its powers, and if applications to the zoning administrator will also go to the community board, would be critical in understanding the future of land use review in front of community boards. Are you just going to be reviewing big things, or will you also still get at least a comment on the smaller things? And so I have a bunch of questions that if I were sitting in your shoes, I might ask. So, what changes would you like to see to help community boards do their job better? And that's something that really nobody has been talking about during this process. Like, you have your job to do. It's really not a topic of how you improve your processes. And should it be? You could say, well, that's not what it's about, and that's fun. Do you have opinions regarding projects that qualify community board review? What do you want to see? What don't you want to see? What do you end up seeing and you go, yeah, we're not going to add anything to this? If you have opinions about that, you might want to weigh in. Would it be okay for small projects to bypass the community board? What about the city council? What about timelines? Do you have enough time to do your job right now? What about the roles within the ULURP process? If the borough president had a bigger or smaller role, do you think that would be okay? What about concurrent reviews? This is something that's discussed explicitly. The borough president and the community board having the same 60 days and having their recommendations at the same time. Some changes could diminish the role of council. Is that okay? The mayor's commission focuses on more on zoning and not so much on planning. The council's commission suggests a reworking of 197A plans and comprehensive planning. Should comprehensive planning be part of the charter, right? Community boards used to be called community planning boards, right? And have a long history in planning in New York City. You may have an opinion about comprehensive planning and whether that needs to be part of the charter. And what about the 197A plan process? If it's going to be reworked, how should it be reworked? I think somebody from community boards or community boards should be advocating for changes that they would like to see in that. Okay, and then what's next? So there are still public hearings going on. You can consider written testimony to both the mayor and the council. Consider developing board resolutions on your thoughts and concerns. And then once the ballot proposals are out, you may want to consider community education on what this all means and host those. That's what I got. More than happy to answer questions and comments.
Just what's our timeline on this, that we actually get something in so that we can impact it
Middle of
before?
July.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
about right. I mean,
That's
the
what I
last
thought,
hearing
but-
date is July,
Yeah.
for the mayor is July 7th.
Which is the date of the one in Harlem?
We need to
Yes.
vote, we
Yeah.
need to vote at the end of, in our June full board meeting to testify for both in July.
Yeah, and I think they'll be accepting written comments.
Yeah.
Afterwards, but not, they put out the preliminary report shortly after their last hearing
Right.
before that, so.
Right, I had asked for the written comments so
Yeah.
that we could do resolutions.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And was there any real input on the idea of the zoning administrator? Because it seems to me if they're worrying about speeding things up, maybe that office could provide and work with developers so they get things in order
I
and
think
ready to
that's
go
the idea.
quicker.
I think that's the idea is,
Yeah.
and some of these. Some actions would just go to the zoning administrator, right? Small things, little changes, which, I could see, I could see like a lot of things that go full ULURP. It's like, you look at it and go, why is this in front of us?
So, you said the zoning administrator was a role that was envisioned in like 1961.
Yeah.
And can you just restate what happened to the zone administrator? Like,
I don't know.
it just fell by the wayside, like one of those things in city government just was never filled and never.
So there was a report
Yeah.
that went into, plan for zoning, and then the
Yeah.
Voorhees report on zoning, the zoning resolution. It was the 1950s, when these planning went into the 1961 resolution. And that report has the role of a zoning administrator in it. It just was never adopted. And there are a number of things that were in that report that were never adopted. And there are other parts of that report that has the zoning verbatim. So why they were never adopted, the things that were left out is lost to the sands of time.
Thank you.
Yeah, there wasn't a city council at that time. I don't know how much that impacted.
It's the,
I mean, that, because there's a big difference. Once you have a city council, it's a huge difference.
Would you mind going back to the fast tracking slide, please, George?
Sure.
This is more of a comment for the rest of the board, especially the folks on the land use committee who heard the presentation from DCP about the East Fifth Street NYPD site that, or rather HPD, the HPD presentation.
Sorry, here, yes.
So there were a lot of questions to HPD when we had that meeting about, why the timeline was going to take so long. We've been talking about building affordable housing on that site for, a decade almost at this point. And there was two timelines that HPD presented to us. One is the as of right production of the housing, and a second involves the ULURP. HPD estimated, and I'm a little fuzzy on the precise details, but more than a year, up to 2 or 3, to put a rezoning through the council so that we could build more affordable housing on one of the few viable sites we have to do it within the district. HPD, I think, is very, of two minds about whether or not to go forward with that, because it necessarily, or the rezoning that is, not the housing production, the rezoning specifically. And because it necessarily adds a lot of time to us receiving that critically needed senior housing in the district. This proposal, I jump for joy when I see stuff like this, because we know we want that project. Do we want to be involved in the process? Yes, obviously we have been, but we need to just do this more quickly. We know we want 100% affordable housing. We know that this project has been identified over and over again in our district need statements. And here we have an opportunity to make those timelines, which we were all gassed by, more manageable. So I thought that was something I wanted to mention, is something I'm excited about personally. Another thing, if you wouldn't mind going to the ULURP actions, the categories.
Categories, yeah.
I've mentioned this a number of times to folks before. I'm sure you all know that I work for the city. I work for EDC, and this is something that comes up often in my work. I manage property that the city owns, a lot of it in industrial neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods experience the largest amount of disinvestment in the post-war period. So there's a lot of tax lien property that the city owns in these areas. We want, and I'll give a specific example on Staten Island. There's an aggregates business that moves construction material in New York City with a New York City parcel in the middle of their lot. They are on a month-to-month lease because we can't give them a long-term lease, or we can't sell the property without going through a whole ULURP action. And this is something we want to do, but we just don't have the staff time. You know, there are other things that the city, my department, EDC has prioritized. And, you know, we're in this awkward position where, you know, like, we know, we agree with what we want to do, but the sheer cost of the bureaucracy prevents us from doing it. You know, I think that there's a lot to be, you know, ironed out with this proposal. We don't want the city to be able to sell 50 acres, you know, without the public getting a say. But there's also, you know, far more, as George shows on that next slide, you know, the amount of tiny little awkward properties far outweighs the, you know, golden gooses that the city might get rid of. And
Absolutely.
if we can be a little bit more thoughtful about the procedures by which we get rid of this property, there's a lot of opportunity costs that we're incurring just because we can't get around to doing it. So, you know, I think I always still want people to be thoughtful, but there's a lot of good in this proposal. And, you know, I'd encourage people to see that, and come November, make a, you know, decision when we get the actual language, or before that, we'll probably get it in September.
Can I respond just on one thing? I would agree.
What?
On the fast tracking of you. The thing that probably, I don't know, it depends on the size of the project that you're talking about, is that you're gonna do a rezoning, you gotta do environmental assessment. And then you gotta do, if it's big enough, you gotta do a scoping
EIS.
document, and then you gotta have a scoping hearing, and then you gotta go do your EIS, and then you gotta get your draft environmental review done. And then you gotta complete your land use application, and then you get to get everything certified by DCP, and then you start ULURP. That stuff in the front, I mean, that's a long time, and the ULURP part compared to the ULURP part, and that's largely dictated by state law. And there's not, there are some things that the city tried to improve some of the processes through the blast effort, but you know, in my view, it's more in the margin. It didn't make major changes in the process, and so I understand that level of frustration. You know, I think you're spot on it, but I will also say that there isn't that much time you can save in ULURP itself because of all that stuff in the front. And so, yeah, you can save it, but you know, I think what you all have to say about a project makes projects better. And you gotta live with it forever.
All right, so there's a lot of people,
Yeah.
so,
You should call him.
okay, well, I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna let her go, and then Sean.
I've only been through one ULURP and you were involved. You were a consultant on a part of that. It was one of the most painful processes for the community. And I understand like the pre-ULURP process, we were also involved in that. But then by the time we got to the ULURP process, it was pretty apparent and the timing was painstaking. So my point there is having that just one, but very deep and painful experience for the community, whatever we can look at in terms of making changes, we should. And I would, you know, want to do something in the middle between what your opinion is and what Campbell is saying, but to look at the positive part to
Absolutely.
see what we can. I mean, I advocate support because that process was so horribly painful for the community. What can we do to speed up some of the, you know, the process? So, and then also, I understand that the member deference isn't part of the charter, but that also killed us. So like, I would advocate for change in that process as well, but thank you.
Well, I
Thanks.
just wanna be clear that we're not advocating to George for anything, we're advocating to each other.
Yeah.
Because we are writing the resolution.
Yeah.
I know, I'm not saying advocate, I'm
I know,
saying.
but I'm just
advocate.
saying,
I
it's not
wasn't- I
up to
wasn't
him, it's-
advocating to him.
Yeah.
My point is that we are the ones who are going to create the resolution. So that was it.
Right.
And Sean had his hand then.
No.
No? Then Catherine and then Susan.
Yeah.
please.
Yeah, two things. In following up with the question about how to, particularly going through the pre-LARPing, doesn't a lot of this also come back again to first part of it, shortening the process, but also the availability of resources? If we get more resources, if we can we meaning the community board can tap into more resources, or maybe even make it easier for some of the city developments like EDC or city agencies to tap in those resources, maybe some of that time can be cut down. And again, I'm thinking about potentially using the administrator, the zoning administrator or whatever, because it seems like that's a way to short circuit it or shortcut it. And then I have a question about the categorically beneficial projects, because I think we can all agree on 100% affordable housing. Where do they put city shelters?
I don't recall them making a distinction between them.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
just, because I can see communities go crazy anyway, we might not want that, but on the other hand, I don't think it's unfair to have community input on some
As I
level.
recall, it says categorically beneficial projects like 100% affordable housing.
So
and
no
it doesn't-
definition.
Doesn't, get it to definition.
And who decides?
So our shelters haven't, any of them gone through you, or they don't need rezoning. They come to us for notification and input, but we actually don't approve or not approve any of the shelters. So our specifics, so I've been, Nancy, if you're referring to City of Yes as a painful, which one were you referring to?
The borough-based trails.
The what, that was not here. It's
still
painful because the community is so divided, and you're always gonna have that. But, I also find it painful, but I don't know that that's a reason not to do it. So I've been dealing with these ULURPs in this area, probably 25 years. We've gone through a lot. This community board specifically has voted and has a position on community-based planning, that we believe that the community where people live and where things are happening are the ones that know their community best and should be having strong, I'm not going to say should make the decisions, but should be having strong input. I'm going to mention two ways in which ULURPs where we made a tremendous change. One was Essex Crossing problem. So we spent a couple of years pre-ULURP on that, which was very worthwhile. The city refused to do transportation planning with the land use. And anyone who lives in that area knows why that
Still
was a
upset about
mistake.
it.
That was a mistake. We begged for that, but they wanted to get it through. And now the people that live there are paying for it. The city, and it was EDC actually holding the meetings, gave us there was a lot of collaboration and a lot of working together. She lived it. And it was 50% affordable housing. It ran from very affordable to middle class. It I forget, what was it, 80 years or something?
No, it was,
Originally.
Originally there were, I don't remember that, we'd asked for permanent, affordability. They took it away and then we had to come back.
My point was, the only reason we have permanently affordable housing instead of temporarily affordable housing is because this community board insisted it be permanent, and because of council deference, because Margaret Chin said she wouldn't vote for it unless it was permanent. Night before the ULURP vote, the city gave in. That's one example of why the community board input. And I'll give you one more. The East River, which was very controversial. The city said it had to be done all at once. There's no way you could raise it 8 feet and stop in the middle and do parts, right? So it absolutely couldn't be done, except this community board insisted that it had to be done. And our council member, Carlina Rivera, said, worked with Parks and DDC, and again, council member deference, and got it done in sections where we have over 40% open at any one time. So we make a huge difference. This board makes a huge difference. And for us to give up what we know our community needs, because a project may go through faster, that project may go faster with less affordable housing. It will go through faster with less affordable housing. We have made projects with AFI have deeper affordable housing. Sometimes that little extra time matters. And I don't think, as you said, most of it is in you. I agree the process can be improved. And I think there's probably 100 things for Euler that could be improved. But for the community, to tell the community that they should have less input about what they know they need. And I'm gonna say right now, the city doesn't want to give us as much affordable housing as we want. Every project except Fifth Street, which Carlina, as council member deference, arranged in the Soho thing. Was that it? Is that true? Yeah.
Yep, so-
Yeah, that was a council member thing. Other than that, we are always fighting for more affordable, more deeply affordable, more permanent. And to take that away from us when we succeed for our community is really something to consider.
Thank you. So I appreciate your comments, Susan. I guess, my reflections is, I see a lot of effort to rethink everyone's role and power, right, in the process. And it's really unclear at this moment, with the limited information that is available, right?
Yes.
For us to know to what extent and what does that look like. So that's the first thing, but which then makes me really concerned about the next part which is, yes, I do agree. I have been a part of many rezoning projects in this neighborhood. I have lived zoning for a long time. I should have a doctorate in zoning, okay? Like seriously. And so, it has everything from the Chinatown Working Group to, the East Village, Lower East Side to, I don't even wanna, keep going. And it's been long and it takes long. And I get it. And I would love to streamline parts of it that could be streamlined. And I would love for us to look at what are the most efficient ways. But I think what we cannot surrender is our input. We cannot surrender our role as a community. And we cannot diminish that by thinking that people are divided. They're going to be divided. That is democracy. People have a lot of different ideas, but it is worth hearing them. It is worth that time of people participating, because for the most part, I have mostly seen projects improve and get better.
Yes.
That's what I have seen the outcome of. So I think, yes, we want to make everything as efficient as possible, but we can't do that at the expense of community engagement and the public's role in decision-making, because as it stands now, that role is very limited in all areas of government. And we are reaching a pivotal moment in time where we're seeing some small evidence of recognition from government that the community plays a vital role. And for me, this, moving forward without the information that we need and sort of scaling back our role and our responsibilities is a step backwards in that process. And so, I know that for me, that's what I will advocate. I would like as much information as possible before, as a committee and a task force, we can come up with a resolution of support or whatever our opinion is, our resolution is going to contain. But as it stands, I do feel like it's important to say that we should not be supporting anything that takes away our ability to have input, our power, and the limited voice we already have.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit. I think, I've participated in so many boards around the city, over the years. and CB3 is a very healthy board with a very healthy membership, and I think a membership that really is reflective of the community, but that's not the case in a lot of community boards. You know, especially in communities which are underserved, our civic engagement is very low. The community board does not reflect the community, and then becomes a very big barrier for a lot of the things that we're talking about. I understand, like, you know, giving up power is a hard thing to think about. And I think there is more devil in the detail around what is the small projects, what is, you know, like, what is the things that the community board won't have input anymore on. But I think we should keep an open mind that there are some things that, like we said, can be streamlined a little bit, that get a little bit bottlenecked at community boards, and where a dysfunctional community board becomes a hindrance for that community to get affordable housing. You know, like the things that we, you know, are doing in community board 3 is really trailblazing. It's not really the reality for most community boards.
Thank you. I will say though that our role as a community board is already pretty limited. It's not like we have a huge role, so that's just a small part of what we're talking about. And then the real issue would be to talk about how community boards are made up, which is another issue, but, and I don't know what to do with it.
I agree with that, Damaris. I think that we are a community board here and our role is as a community board, but I'll admit that I read that document as like a citizen of New York. And, you know, thereafter thought about my role, you know, in reacting to it as a CB member. You know, I think that the authors of the charter revision, like review, whatever the document, would agree that the community boards are oftentimes not really the issue. You know, as you mentioned, Damaris, we have a pretty limited role already. And the key issues are downstream from us. And I think that, you know, a lot of the frustrations that, you know, we experience are, you know, when there's a bunch of hullabaloo downstream and then it gets kicked back to us and things like that. And, you know, I think the folks in this room could agree that there's a lot of efficiencies to be realized after it gets from us, because, you know, like, why kick us while we're down, like you're getting at, Damaris? You know, we already have so little, you know, influence in this. I think that the majority of the benefits from what the Charter Revision Commission is getting at are outside of the CB's purview. And I think that, you know, as we start to wrap this meeting up and maybe get towards talking about what a resolution includes, I think that, you know, we can find a lot of common ground on this community board in presenting a resolution that, you know, it focuses on those efficiencies that can be realized within the process that is just a whole bunch of bureaucratic back and forth for no real benefit. You know, the components about like disposing of 3 square foot city parcels and things like that, you know? I think we can all agree on things like that and agree in such a way that actually still realizes the majority of the benefits that the commission is discussing. So, you know, as we think about the language in here, you know, I think that it makes sense to discuss or note how the community board already has such a limited role. And, you know, maybe we can consider, I think the only specific CB provision or recommendation in the document was to have our review happen concurrently with the borough president, or to happen like not at all. So we can consider those, I think, specifically, but on a general sense, you know, I think that we can find a lot of common ground in discussing how there's so many efficiencies that can be realized in the rest of this process.
Campbell, while you had the floor, I kind of missed it when you were talking about how the pre-EULA process is impacted by the EULA process. I kind of got it, but can you explain that a little bit more?
You know, George made a good point that there are baked-in requirements before you get to EULA that set your timelines in a very explicit sense. The environmental review process, I think, being the key component there. And, you know, separately and apart, I pray to God for state level SECRA review. But, you know, I think that a lot of the, you know, just reticence of and fear of the EULA process drives these pre-engagements, like, you know, we are getting, because we've asked for it, a lot of engagement from city agencies, and this is starting to become standard practice for agencies and developers to a lesser extent to actively engage the community before they even get into the ULURP process. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Community engagement is good, as we've discussed at this meeting. It often makes projects better, but, you know, it nevertheless introduces delay, and I don't want to sound like Scrooge McDuck, but we should realize the consequences of that, you know, like, and weigh the costs and benefits of it. You know, I don't have a directionally appropriate opinion on that, but like, yeah, I think we can all agree that we want the projects to be as good as they can be and to be delivered as fast as possible. And I think that there is a certain amount of, you know, things in the timeline that may not be as necessary as we might think.
Any other questions?
Thank you. I just had a comment, and I think what I was trying to say was what Campbell said, but much more eloquently is, I think there is common ground, and what we can do to support some changes, I would suggest that, but it's also to preserve the community board's very limited role. I didn't mean to say that we should give anything us up for, you know, in terms of our role, but it's also to ask, like, what else would we want to include in there? Thanks.
So I just, you're welcome. I just want to remind folks that we got through the city of yes twice. Okay? And that was a very arduous process.
Oh, it was.
We will get through this.
Yeah.
And we will come to some common ground, and we, you know, and Catherine will, and her committee will help lead us through all of this as well. We'll be fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna be okay, okay? But the other thing I did want to say is, just as we're thinking about this in an open way, you know, I know that we think about efficiency and cost sort of in the same realm, but I would ask us to think about it slightly separately and think about what does efficiency mean and versus cost, because the truth is that, you know, there's not a lot of cost that's dedicated, a lot of resources dedicated to the parts that are relevant for us, right? So, you know, I'm just saying, let's broaden the way we think so that when we're coming together to sort of write this resolution out, you know, maybe, you know, we might come up with some creative ways to tangle and untangle that.
Just on top of, one of the things I think we should concentrate is the fact that they said the possibility of getting more resources to the community board, which is something I think we could use and would be better for all of us. So I think we should definitely support that. What about the non-land use? Because
That's what I was raising my
yeah, I was
hand
looking at what Board 8 did. And they commented on the odd year elections. They commented on, there was something about landmark districts and that they shouldn't be weakened. The whole ULURP we've gone on. And they also commented on term limits for the community board.
So if I could just say, I should introduce everyone to Orrin, who's our new assistant district manager. And what he did today, and we actually can have a document we could share, is he went through the rest of the document and just did like a headline and 2 or 3 bullet points about the other issues, just to inform the committee so they could decide if they want, and everything you mentioned is in there. So when we're done talking about the land use, I'm hoping the documents are on here, we can connect them and share them.
So Catherine, you take over that.
Okay. And I probably should say, I totally agree with you about the input from the community. And even with the city of yes, I was unhappy about what the community didn't have input on, or it was being cut down. And also even the council members, because there were plenty of times when I had to arm wrestle with the city and with developers to try and get more for the community, because we actually didn't have the member deference. It just was more honored in the breach than not. And looking at some of the ULURP that I did, that the one that deals with the Whole Foods and the, you know, the
The Cooper
Liz
Square.
Christie Garden and,
Yeah,
Cooper Square.
That was the
What?
Cooper Square
Cooper
urban renewal
Square.
site, yeah.
it was a Cooper Square.
Yes, it was.
And I was arguing all the time for more affordable housing, and I think we got it up
I was
to
there.
maybe 30% at least.
It was
And I
there.
would have done 50 if I could have. And I couldn't even get the other council member to go along with me, so getting it to 30 was, I mean, and saving a lot of the not-for-profit groups, none of which would have been done, and the Liz Christie Garden wouldn't have been there if I weren't arguing and using the community and their position. So,
I remember it too.
and I won't even mention the difference between Charis and what's the one that we did? The other. Great, it's an art center now. It's on
The
Rivington
Clemente, you mean
Street.
the Clemente Soto
Clemente
Villas?
Soto Villas, yeah, they came through at the same time.
Yeah,
The
that was because
difference
they were
was-
being auctioned off at the
Yeah, the
time.
difference was I kept
Juliana.
mine for the community
Yes,
and Pagan
that was about.
put
the
his on,
difference,
yeah.
Yes, that was.
That's
that
why we
was.
got rid of it.
Yes.
That's one of the
So-
reasons, yes.
So can we go do that? What time is it? And there are no questions from anyone
There aren't,
online?
I'm,
Should
that's
we
what I'm
ask them?
watching.
We have any
No,
more
they
questions?
can
for
hear us,
George?
right? So,
Yeah, they can hear us.
okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, I wanted to say one thing. So I'm gonna say how this all plays out depends a lot on the administration. And I am gonna say, when the administration tries to push things through quickly, I think it backfires and takes longer. I want to go back. I'm
They're not gonna
aging.
be around much longer.
I know. But I want to go back to how things worked under Bloomberg, which is when we had our Essex crossing. The point of the pre-Euler was to work everything out. So when Euler came, there was nothing left to do except for vote, it just went
Right.
through. That was the point, is everything was taken care of and negotiated or compromised.
We're talking about.
Pardon? Yeah, well, Essex Crossing, we did that, but that was
the
true on
guidelines, yeah.
that was true
On
on
all of
all of
them.
the others. We
Although
did that on
It
all
was,
of them.
It was.
We
But don't
always got
forget the previous Essex crossings where we had fighting constantly.
50 years only.
Yes.
But I think, we used to have.
Can I say something? But you know what, Catherine? It was because the community board decided to take that up as a task force and a charge at the time and brought everyone together. That's why that thing moved. And we were doing, at the time, trying to prove. So that's just another, I think, example of a process where it was driven by the community. It did take long, but we might still have been looking at some parcels there. I don't know what it would have been.
We brought
Yeah.
it to the city.
That's
We
right.
brought it to the city and then
Yeah,
EDC
remember?
managed it, but we brought it to the city.
Not that there's that much of that left.
Yeah. So so do you want to look at the document? So could you figure out how to take that up there and
And
share
just for the
what you
records,
did?
Members, this
Yeah.
was a joint meeting, but Catherine is heading the task force for the charter revision. So I'm gonna have her take over the rest of the meeting.
Oh, really?
with
I'm
the-
not
yes,
sure
with the
how
remainder of the-
how it's
Well, I'll
connected.
help you, but with the remainder
it's
of the
fine.
recommendations
Yeah.
that
Do I need to leave?
she wanted to
Um,
raise that are
do you-
not within the land.
Have any opinions?
So
on
you don't
whatever?
need to leave. Would you like to leave because you're done?
saying that you want me to leave the Zoom.
Oh,
Because it's joint meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm just saying that, we're done with the land.
This is your
use
computer,
matters,
right?
So I'm gonna turn
But this
over
is
the
their
chairing of the
computer?
meeting to Catherine.
But then
so she can
there's no
take
way
us
to get the
through
document on here, right?
Okay.
Oh, there is?
We'll try. No, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I'll try.
So to be
Yeah,
clear,
I
we're not gonna
suspect-
do, are we gonna do a resolution?
No,
draft?
so,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
no,
so let me
that-
be more
okay,
clear
fine.
too.
I should try and find
So,
something.
then we're having our regular meeting
Okay.
on the 17th. And I think, this is where we have to make a decision.
Yeah, well.
Because the resolution,
Um,
now that there is a task force, has to sort of come through that. So we have to, I think, on the land use pieces, decide, what we want to see to pass that along to the, or work
We
with
have input on
Catherine.
that?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But
So
I'm
we
saying,
should attend the meeting.
yes, you should
Yeah.
attend that meeting as well. How about that? That's even better. You
Right.
should attend that meeting. That's where we're gonna, I think, have a substantial amount of conversation.
Right.
And so maybe, there might be something, a draft form just to get us started.
Mhm.
If anybody wants to work on something like that with me, please let me know. That would be super helpful that we can then send out to everyone. So that when we get to the meeting, we're not starting from absolute scratch. Because we'll be there all.
Are we gonna wrap our land use
Okay, I
meeting
have that.
now and do attendance, or are we gonna do it at the end?
So that's what I don't know how that works, and I'm gonna wait for Susan to come back, so
Okay,
she can answer that question.
okay.
we still have to do district meeting then.
Yes.
Are we gonna do that at the meeting next week?
No, I don't know, so let me ask her. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Nancy, we were supposed to do it today.
Okay,
But because did not get to the other recommendations, and I don't know how long it's gonna take, I'm just deferring to that.
Mhm.
And then if we have to, then we'll cover that too next week if we can't cover it today. I don't know what time we have to get out of here either.
Mhm.
This isn't our usual space.
Yep.
She's coming back, I think. So this is like a first ever 2-minute break.
All right.
For everyone who is online watching us, please be patient. And we will resume our community board business momentarily.
Right. And you should probably point out that the meeting on the 17th will also be virtual.
Yes, that meeting on the 17th will also be in person and virtual.
I just wanted to double check. I know, Michael, you had already asked if the presentation, if we can get it, because I wanted to kind of
Yeah.
prep it.
Yes.
Read it
Yes.
before the, okay.
while we're waiting around, I'll add one more thing. It's not common knowledge, but the city also does have an existing non-ULURP process for the disposition of city-owned land. It's called the Special Maritime Lease, section 1301(2)(f). So it's a very little used provision within the city. It's a way for the city to lease land on the waterfront for maritime dependent uses. Think about like a concrete plant that imports material from upstate by barge. It comes in, it is unloaded from the barge onto the pier. They are able to go through a city land disposition process that is run by the Department of Small Business Services. So there already are
Excellent.
ways that we have established to go through and do ULURP,
Actions.
yes,
sort of,
ULURP
right?
type actions without going through a ULURP.
So we could maybe point to that too.
Mhm.
Okay, are we ready?
Okay, so
All right.
just want to say we have an hour here and we still got to talk about district needs too. And-
Okay, we were just talking about that and whether or not we needed to talk about that at this meeting or next week. Or at the next meeting if we can't get to it. Okay,
Okay, I don't know if it, okay, go ahead. So what are we doing? Just,
So I think we're gonna go through. You
Okay.
wanted to make a presentation of the land
Well,
use items.
I mean, this is as much as we know. I don't know if do you want us to read
that's
them?
fine. Talk
Yeah.
to us about those.
Like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, or this is
Don't
what we
need it
have.
over here
I mean,
too?
It's what?
We need it in both screens?
Is it online?
have.
Is it
Susan,
sharing
where's the
to
lap-
Zoom?
He has a laptop.
Is it online? Can people online see it? Can you look
Yeah,
and
that was
see?
my question.
That's what we have to have happen.
So I think that this is what they're using to connect everything, not our computers. What do you? So that's what they're saying.
They probably think the meeting is over.
There we go.
Oh.
There we go, good.
Can we see participants?
Those are,
9 people.
yeah, go into attendees instead of,
Oh, okay, I
I
see
can,
it
wait, I
now.
can do that here.
Got it.
people.
Yeah, they're there.
That's technology.
Yeah, love it, as long as someone else is doing
Right?
it.
Okay, so Catherine, do you want to go through them? Do you want Norm to read them?
Can someone ask a question?
Somebody's asked a question.
What?
Can we look at that question?
Oh, who's got a question?
Oh, there you go.
Just allow,
Oh, no problem.
no, we
Oh,
don't
we
want to go
can't
into,
see.
those are questions and answers. I already went through all those.
Okay,
We should tell people if they have a question to raise their Zoom hand.
right.
So we're saying that now, if people have questions, they should raise their Zoom hand.
So you have to click on
Okay,
the
so if we're going
participants
through
box
this, I gotta
Okay,
get the
In
yeah,
order to see, in order to see people raise their hand.
microphone.
You're just attendees, you're not in the meeting.
there we go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah?
They can't read, they can't, but they said.
They can raise their hand.
Oh, if they're attending. Their hand?
What?
This is the panel,
Yes, they-
panel mode, okay? It's not.
No,
Oh, no, they're
attendees,
raising their hand.
attendees can raise their
Okay, great.
hand.
Yay, thank you for doing that.
Thank you,
Sherry, Ryan,
Oops.
and Marks.
So
Dean,
we're
we
not,
appreciate
so,
you.
yeah,
Can we
so,
allow them to?
Wait, did she?
Oh.
did Sherry, did you want to ask a question?
You can
You
raise
just
your
lowered,
hand
you
again.
just lowered her hand, yeah.
Yes.
But then you have to allow her, no, don't do that, just allow her to talk.
Well,
I
yeah,
think she was just,
Dina,
that was the
If you go
audio.
to the three dots at the end of her name,
I'll hover over her name.
go to Sherry's name.
And then allow to talk.
Okay, yeah, go there and do, no,
Can you?
it's, oh, just, no, click on
Now
allow to
click on
talk.
the audio now.
Click on, you don't, no, that's me, that'll do feedback,
There she goes.
I think.
okay, so she's mute, Sherry is mute.
Did you just mute her?
Now, she can talk
No.
now.
Hi,
can you hear
me?
Yes,
yes.
we figured it
Oh,
out.
hi,
Thank
hi,
you for
hi.
your patience.
Yeah, I'm still here and thank you for helping us understand how to participate online. I was typing questions into the Q&A, but I'll raise my hand if I have a comment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, so is this, yeah, it's on. Are we taking other questions or can we try and go to the,
We can go now to the next part.
okay,
There are no other
Okay, so we
questions.
want to move the participants so we could read it.
okay, in that case, well, hang on. Are we just gonna scroll through it or do you want me to go over it?
You tell me. Am I going over
Yeah, can you go over it?
Sure,
Thank you.
sure.
Why don't you
You
just
want
go
this
over it
back?
for us?
can you make it bigger on the screen? Oh, like you-
Yeah. And if you are able to make the image larger, please, if you can do that easily.
Well, if you
Which
do,
the-
you won't be
the-
able to.
Perfect.
Okay.
Is that good? Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Okay,
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
move up, yeah.
okay.
All right, this
So the first one's member deference
first
anyway.
part we kind of already went over with George.
Yeah,
It's just generally about. kind of the
Yeah, I would
housing
just
me to do it?
skip the housing part probably and start with election turnout. Just read what you
yeah, the
have.
election voter turnout should be the
Yeah.
first one.
Just read what you have.
All right, the issue here is that voter turnout has been declining since at least the eighties. And this report outlines a few ideas as solutions, such as consolidating local elections into even years so that they coincide more often with state and federal elections. This has been proven to increase turnout in other places. We just don't do it here yet. And then open primaries was the other idea, which is to effectively exclude.
Mhm.
At the moment, they exclude a large
Well,
constituents.
maybe,
Potentially, that might not be registered to a specific party, so they can't participate in the primary. There was a whole section about nonprofit procurement and payment. Basically, the city frequently fails to pay its nonprofit service providers on time, creating uncertainty, financial hardship, and I'd say distrust, maybe it's the worst one.
yeah, on that one, we should probably point out that what's been happening is huge amounts of the not-for-profits are not getting the money on time. And the city has gotten progressively worse as time goes by, so we really need to find some kind of, they changed the process in the last, I think, decade or so, and it's gotten so much worse. And that's why there are proposals coming up so that we can get
Yeah.
around that.
If I may, like, weigh in on this too, for all of us. So, you
Yeah.
know, what tends to also happen is that the city has various contracting portals. And they keep
Well, they
changing
changed
the
it
portals and
recently.
upgrading the
Yeah,
portals
yeah.
from HHS Accelerator to Passport to this, to that. And the systems, the staff, I don't believe, are properly trained
That is correct.
on the, on the systems. So when you are delayed, you cannot really get support from them. And this is such an issue that there are major discussions about it and coalitions. And just to tell you the impact, the city owes.
Roll it
owes
just a
at least
little
$1 million.
Oh, a million or a billion?
The other way.
Oh my God. I would say it's at least a billion practically. It's.
Yeah.
No, they owe gold.
Oh,
Gold.
just you. Oh, my
Right.
Lord.
Yeah,
That's a-
no,
But
not, no, of course, it's lots of money.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would say
So
almost
this-
every
it's a
not-for-profit in the
severe issue,
city has
yes.
had a problem with
It is a
this.
real issue.
Yeah.
Okay, continue. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Orin.
And they mentioned the grant funds and the reforming. I think the discretionary funds,
There were
there
a lot
was
of.
a lot of problems with that, getting them out, because not-for-profits don't know how to, even if the council has awarded the funds, a lot of the not-for-profits don't know how to access them.
They don't generally have the capacity because the contracting process has multiple steps
Yeah.
to it, and there are a lot of forms that you need to fill out.
So they need to streamline the process.
Yes,
There were a lot of different solutions mentioned in that, but
So you want to go
Okay.
up to the next one? Yeah.
section on climate and infrastructure. We're familiar with these climate threats from flooding, extreme heat, and brush fires, most recently, have all been increasing. And so solutions mentioned in this report were loosening ULIP requirements
of
that
course.
often delay resiliency projects or even jeopardize them completely.
Whoops. Yeah, don't
That
turn
was
it.
fancy. Thank you for that.
Okay,
And then they mentioned curbside electric vehicle charging, that charter amendments could help those.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
And then I guess
Volunteer
that's less
people.
combustion vehicles.
Right.
But, and then lastly, why it's bulleted, but, voluntary buyout programs for sellers in flood prone areas. They could improve those to be much more appealing.
Okay, so the next one George already did.
yeah,
Yes, and George said that
Is
was.
that the last one?
Yep.
No. Oh,
that's it.
what about the council member? Oh, we already did council member, didn't we?
The council
So George
deference.
included council
George
member
went over
Yeah,
that.
he already did
To
that.
the extent that this section about curbside electric vehicle charging, I believe it's also a ULURP thing. You need to update because you're impacting the city street map. I believe you need to update the city street map, which then triggers ULURP. Am I correct there, George?
I don't know the answer to that because it's width. I don't know if that would actually require a map change to put it on the street. It may have to do with franchises.
So what
Yeah.
about the, so maybe that would be similar to the charging and Wi-Fi stations that are all over
Yes,
the
right.
city?
They
Franchise.
don't need you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
So
they
did
don't
don't
those
need
need
have to go through,
dealers.
that was franchise? Okay.
It's franchises.
Franchising.
Well, we have charging stations on the street now. They didn't go through. We have
Yeah.
one like,
You
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so then
We
it
have a
must be
couple
a,
down
it
around
must
East
be a
River and
franchise
Seward
review
Park.
commission.
we have it right at Cooper Square, the plaza at Cooper Square.
Mhm. They're on the sidewalks.
Well, I mean, this is clearly not really clear. What would they be? Charter amendments could make voluntary buyout programs for sellers in flood
That's
prone areas. I
separate.
This is
mean,
unrelated.
That's not gonna
That's not
impact
it.
our community board. Those are,
Yeah.
like.
Staten Island in particular, but the
We don't
flood
have
prone
to weigh
areas.
in on everything. We're
Right.
just saying this is what they're doing.
Did you find anything at all in that about commenting on community board term limits or anything about landmark districts? Because these are things that some of the other community boards have taken positions on.
That must be in the city council
Maybe it's
one.
in the city council.
This is only the
Might be.
mayor's one.
Yeah, I know.
This
yeah,
is
they'll
only
come
the
to
mayor's
us
one.
too. We can have them come
Yeah.
and
we
make a
should have those.
presentation around
Right.
their recommendations as well.
Yeah, because those are things we might want to
Yeah.
weigh in on.
Okay.
So those, I think, if I'm right, won't be on the ballot this November, so we could keep working on them.
Right, so
The other ones.
council has told me that they're going to try to make recommendations that they would like to see included in 2026 ballot.
So we have plenty of time for that.
All right, but we do have to take a position on the question of changing to the odd year elections. And because I think that's in the mayor's. And I also think the, what was the other one we had on there? Oh, open primaries.
The open
There's
primaries.
the open
No,
primaries, the nonprofit procurement process,
Right,
which I think,
which I think we have to comment on because it's
Yes.
a disaster.
right,
It's such a disaster.
it is such a
Right,
disaster.
yeah.
Yeah, so the elections,
And I can
So
tell
these-
you, if you want an argument against consolidating the local elections, I'll be more than happy to give it. Because it's a terrible idea.
Why?
Why is
Tell
that?
us
I'm
why.
very curious, please.
Yeah,
Okay,
please
should
tell
I
us
use
why.
the microphone?
Go ahead.
Whatever makes you more comfortable.
All right, yeah.
Should we stop?
You.
Should we stop sharing the screen or no?
No.
Okay.
No, it's fine, I guess. Yeah, I mean, and I know some of the community boards that I voted on have already said they dislike this. The idea, the proposal is to increase voting. But the problem is that it puts all the city elections at the same time as the state and federal. And many good government groups anyway, and certainly a lot of people who do this a lot and do elections, feel that what it will actually do is absolutely decrease the input that people would have in the local elections. That if you've got 30 or 40 positions, say 30, that you have to go all the way down on voting. You really have to be dedicated to get the whole way down. You're better off, and I would recommend and feel that we leave it the way it is, because it allows us to concentrate on the city elections separate from the state and the federal. And I think people are much more likely to have input if it's split up. I mean, there were other reasons, but you and then you.
Sorry, so that's an interesting point. That's a kind of a counterproductive and unintended consequence.
Oh, I think it's very intended.
But you know, to your point, you know, folks have had problems with ranked choice and that like, some people don't even fill out the ballot, with the 5 choices. Some people just put one person or 2
Well, some people.
for the rankings and they don't, you know, make full use of the 5. So I think that maybe bolsters your point
Yeah.
about this counterproductive nature of it.
Right, I just mean that the importance in the city of the elections and the fact that we really should have a chance to talk to our elected officials and ask them questions and really get very informed on it. And if we're doing everything from the president all the way down at the same time, in particular every 4 years, but people are not going to get to the bottom of the list. Plus, it will cost a lot more to get any kind of airtime. The cost of ads, the cost of doing mailing, if you think it's bad now, imagine if you're getting everything at the same time. People just aren't going to look at it. That's my opinion. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I agree with you that, you know, having everything happen at the same time, you know, my dedication per electoral race, you know, I need to dedicate some time to watching the presidential election and the Senate races and the Congress races. So I have less time to spread across all these races. But, you know, I was frankly shocked at how few people voted in 2021. We have almost 9 million people in the city, and there was a hair over 1 million people who voted for our mayor. You know, that just like, it appalls me. It appalls me that we'll have spent 4 years sitting around with Eric Adams, and only 1/8 of this city voted for him. That's unbelievable. And, you know, I think that if we can increase the amount of people who vote, because, you know, we all knew which way the New York City election, like the people in New York City were going to vote in 2020 presidential election, 2024 presidential election. You know, I think that folks are going to show up at that ballot box, you know, when it's the same thing, knowing who they're going to vote for president. And, you know, maybe there's on aggregate, like a little bit less effort paid attention to the local races. But if we can get 2 million people, 3 million people, 4 million people to vote in the mayoral elections, that's a good thing, because to me, that's a more representative government. It frustrates me that we have an elected mayor who only 1/8 of the city voted for. There's 7/8 of the city that didn't vote on whether or not Mayor Adams became the mayor. And I'll remind you all that he beat Catherine Garcia in the last round of ranked choice by a couple thousand votes.
Yeah.
Think about that, you know, 1/8 of the city, and then he becomes the mayor by a margin of just a few thousand votes. What happens when Mayor Adams has to face an electorate of 30% of the city of New York? That's, why I think
We.
consolidating.
It's kind
Could
of-
help if we had better candidates.
Well.
Oh, yes, it would.
I wanted to say, we are being
You want this?
recorded, we are being recorded,
Let's be
we're a
mindful.
neutral city agency.
Right.
So maybe we don't wanna talk about specific people.
Okay. Yeah, let me ask you a different question. How many people go and do the citywide? Like the one that's coming up, how many people actually go through the entire ballot and go down to where they're voting for judicial convention delegates or district leaders or state committee?
Big old goose egg, probably.
It's a very big fall off.
Mhm.
If you, just getting the numbers doesn't mean that you're getting people to think about the position.
Mhm.
I think it's more important that people know what the position, who's running, and that they make an informed vote. If you're not gonna go the whole way down, you may have a fall off that's just as heavy or even worse than the one you're referring to.
Can I respond directly to
Yeah.
that? I think, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think it's a question of like getting people to vote at all. I think it's a matter of opinion, but I'd rather people show up to the ballot box and get 60% of the way through their ballot, and there be in our district, 40% of the people show up and vote, rather than 10% of the people show up and vote, because that's the number we were hovering around when we elected Carlina for her next term in 2021. I think she's done a great job. She's represented the community, in my opinion, but it's such a small number of people who elect these positions, and that concerns me. I'd like to see just a broader swath of the electorate actually giving our elected officials their mandates.
Damaris?
I don't see enough analysis around the true voter
Yeah.
body, right? So I think when we talk about it based on population, I don't think that that is a fair representation, because we're not taking account for people who can't vote, for children, for those populations, and sort of how that impacts. And then what the percentage is of the voter turnout then. The second point I wanted to just for us to think about as we're deliberating is, what about in communities where people have less resources, and for whatever reason, their struggles, their position, they don't have the ability to amass the kind of information or spend time doing research, or even someone to talk to, or even comprehend. And so now you have all these people, on being voted on at the same time, and with folks that have even less resources than some of us that are in the know or are connected to spaces where, our decisions are informed by our social settings, our economic settings, our work settings, and that varies. So I guess, the only thing I would say is, if the plan here is to increase voter turnout, right? But I think, that's not enough for me. I think meaningful voter
Yes.
turnout. So I would like to see more people voting. But like, for example, if you're looking at now, I was very surprised this election cycle. I keep seeing commercials all the time about ranked choice voting, about campaign finance, about your voter guide, more than I've ever seen it. That's not telling me about the candidates, clearly.
Yeah.
But it is raising sort of the bar, I think, and that's the kind of stuff that maybe I wonder if we decide to make a recommendation on this point at all, can we make a different recommendation? Oh, that's a question that I have.
Okay. Because one of the reasons they
Or say
gave is
no,
also, in addition to increase it, is also cost less. And I think we should be less concerned about how much it costs than how much input we can encourage people to, again, make informed decision. Ariana?
Oh, no, I was just gonna
And
ask.
Sean behind you.
Jared,
Yeah, I think.
Sorry,
Mr.
you
Garcia
should
is
yell
out.
at me because I can't
Go ahead,
see
Sean.
you.
No, I was just gonna
Yeah,
say,
Sean?
I was gonna counter your position on the communities that are lacking resources. I think it also like the burden of multiple election days, multiple primary days, the impact that it has on communities who maybe they can't get to election or have the brain space to go to multiple elections. I think the funding that does go into a national election and the buzz that it brings, right? It draws people that draws more folks to go out and place their vote and be part of the process. They feel more brought in. I mean, I grew up in Harlem where, you know, local elections, what? Those things didn't exist. They did not exist. No one was going to, you know, PS 72 to make their vote. We're talking about the margin in this district. I mean, if you go into the South Bronx, that margin is super, super small. So I think it's, you know, we're here, you know, on a Monday night. We're a very rare breed. We are not the common citizen. Some of that is privilege and some of that is commitment and some of that, you know, is sacrifice. But, you know, if we're thinking about the city at large and you know, how we're gonna get the most turnout and how we're gonna support people, I think it makes sense to link these up. And the other thing I would say is that I was joking with Nancy that I get off from work for primaries, all the elections. So I'm in favor of keeping all the election days. I get off from work in my union contract. But, you know, that's just not the reality for most people. And, you know, even you know, a lot of people are so disenfranchised that they're not even understanding the significance of being a Republican, Democrat, being part of a primary process. Like, that is not something that they're clued into, you know?
But let me ask you a question.
I also, Ariana and Mia back here raising her hand, just to let you know the person on staff.
Oh, okay.
As well.
Susan also had her hand. And Susan, yes.
Yes, I just wanted to respond to Sean's though. How much real information do you think people are gonna get if they're getting flooded with all the information about the president, which has huge amounts of money? And how much is it gonna cost the poor local election to even, anybody running to even make an impact and get people's attention?
But I don't think people are going to the local elections. I mean, that's what the numbers are showing. They're not going. They're not
And we
voting.
have
They're
the
not part of the
matching
process.
funds.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna say, I actually
Susan.
don't have an opinion on one way or the other. I share Campbell's feelings about being really upset that people don't vote. But we're being asked to make a decision without information. We don't know why people aren't voting. I hear that a lot of people aren't voting because they're disgusted with politics. I can
Or the
understand
candidates.
that, or a candidate, and I can understand that. So I don't think we have the information to know why. I do know that from what I see from past campaigns I've been involved in, and for I know the high votes are in New York's, in Manhattan, I do know that the more money you have, the more likely you are to vote. So that's an issue, but why is it an issue? We don't know. And, you know, I think we're arguing without facts.
Ariana?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
So, you know, I mean, I think everybody's points are valid, right? I really do. You know, I think, what can we do to increase voter turnout, right?
Right.
You know, what does that mean? But then, you know, does voter turnout equal good decision-making in a community, right? Who gets to decide? You know, a lot of these things are, I agree with them. But what about us looking at the other real causes of why voter turnout is so low? Let's think about where the polling sites are located. Let's think about accessibility. If the goal is to increase voter turnout, then this is only one measure by which we can do that. There may be other ways that we can do that. And we should explore. I don't know what those ways are. You know, there could be, you know, electronic voting. You know, I think there could be a lot of different ways to do it, huh?
Easier voter registration.
Easier voter
Right.
registration, more accessibility to voting and poll sites. You know, that we I only know this because I work on a lot of the assembly stuff too.
Although I should point out, a lot of this isn't gonna be.
I
isn't
know,
on
but that's the
charter,
point I'm
but
making.
yeah.
The point I'm making, if the goal here is to increase turnout, this is only one way that they are proposing, and there's all these other ways. So for me, and with having no real information to help me make a real concrete decision as to why, I feel like I couldn't support that,
Mhm.
right? And based on the arguments that were made, and it makes sense logically, right? The presidential
Yeah,
campaign it's got a lot of bells and whistles. People come out, right?
the other difference is you know, in the city, we do have campaign finance and
And
we
what about
do have
fundraising?
matching funds.
I was gonna say, what about fundraising? How does
Right.
that impact everyone? If everybody's on the same election cycle, who do you give your money to? And how do
Exactly.
they raise money? And then.
And the presidential and the ones
There
at
you
the
go. So
top will
those are
drain
just-
off all the money.
Right, I don't know that I'm not saying, and I don't know if
Yeah.
we can add any of that in here, but I just present that as just more things for us to consider as we're weighing out the benefits of this versus the pros and the cons.
Anybody else?
I'll add a point on the
Sorry.
open
Sure.
primaries. I think that I like open primaries generally, but I think we're about to get a really salient case for why we need them in New York City. We may very
Open primaries or not?
we have closed primaries currently
Right.
in New York City.
Right.
And I think we are about to get a very good example of why we should have open primaries.
Okay.
I think that we have a very competitive Democratic primary, where there are a number of candidates who conceivably could win. We also have the current mayor running on an independent ballot line, and multiple of the top tier candidates in the Democratic primary have indicated that they will, if they do not win the Democratic Party ballot line, run on their own independent part.
Pretty much all of them are
Yes,
the
so
top tier.
Andrew Cuomo has his own ballot line, Eric Adams has his own ballot line. The center left candidate may run on the Working Families Party ballot line, and then there is the Republican ballot line. So we have a competitive general election on our hands potentially.
Right.
And there are going to be a number of candidates in that general election who may fall by the wayside. I will make no commentary on who it is, but in the way that we typically go into the general election with a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate, it's a 2-horse race. And we know that in New York City, when that's the case, it's really a 1-horse race. The Republican candidate typically doesn't stand a chance. You have to wind the clock back to Giuliani.
That might be changing.
Yeah.
Yes,
What happened to Bloomberg?
true, he ran as independent.
But
Good.
what can?
What I'm getting at is that the open primary would essentially move that competition up, where we have 2 candidates really that run, at the end of the day in the general election. The open primary would pull the contest forward. And I think that's a good idea.
Of course you can, yeah.
Wait, can you give an example? Like, I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand
So,
what we're really saying here, just so
So-
that everybody's
Mhm.
clear, right? So there's a lot of folks are Working Families Party,
Yep.
the Green Party.
Mhm.
Well, you have to go back to the fact that we have the ranked choice voting, and it could be a lot of this is that one of
Right.
those unintended consequences from having ranked choice.
But I'm just trying to
voting.
understand, right, like, so
Mm-hmm.
if if there were open primaries,
Mhm.
then it would not matter
Mhm.
what party I was registered under
Right.
no, it would
in
not.
order to vote in that primary.
No.
Now, that
Everyone
means
who's a
that,
registered voter.
so then how, if it means that,
Mhm.
then it means that you will have Republicans against Democrats, and if that is the case,
Yep.
and yes, I know we have been traditionally on this 2-party system,
Mhm.
how do we result in, how many candidates do we wind up with?
So
Isn't that then,
at
in
the-
essence, a general election?
at the end of the day, right, so the open primary, if it was on the books for right now, June 24th, we would be voting on, and excuse me for naming specific names, but all of the candidates,
All of
include all of the Democratic
Got it.
candidates, plus the Republican candidate, plus any
everybody
independents.
else, yeah.
You would get mashed into the same open primary, and then the top 2 candidates from that open primary
run
would
against
go
each
to,
other.
would run against each other in the general election. What that does is it
How does
allows,
that work with,
Ranked choice.
with the ranked choice voting?
I think that
That's a good question.
either it would
yes.
be reconciled within the process, or the 2 finalists back in
Or
2021.
maybe the top 5 or something instead of the top 2.
I think
Or
the,
maybe they would do the top 5 to come up with the top 2 that then would go to the
Right.
general.
yeah, I believe that's how the proposal
Oh,
is
yeah.
written. So when you go to the general election, you still have your 2-horse race, but it very well might be 2 people who identify as Democrats, or a Democrat and an independent, as opposed to there being essentially a shoo-in for, like, the issue is that
Right.
we decide who the mayor is in June and not in November. Like the general election for mayor, for
In
local
New
elections is
York,
kind of a
yes,
farce.
yes.
However, we
But
might
that's
not have that this year, depending on who the Democratic candidate is.
Well, I have another quick question about this, right? So you know, a two horse, I mean, so if we're able to change that, then why does it have to remain to the general election too?
I only mentioned two because I think that's how it's
It could
written.
be,
That's how,
it could be
that's a
three.
recommendation.
Or 4 or
Okay,
5 or
just-
6.
Or 4 or 5
Yeah.
or 6, right? But then that's the point of this, is to eliminate all of that, I mean, well,
And let
partially.
the best ideas rise to the top. That's the idea. So like you're voting between two, you know,
Candidates.
like
As
two
opposed
candidates
to
who might have
parties.
45% each, as
Sorry.
opposed
Thank you,
to
John.
you having this lopsided
Just
general
yell it.
election result.
Got it.
Okay.
Hang on,
Be a race for real.
yeah. Go ahead.
So one of the things that happens, unfortunately, and particularly in New York, is that people don't always go out and vote for the best candidate, particularly if they're in a campaign and they want the weakest opponent.
Right.
And what they do, and this happens, it happened in the last national election, I believe people talked about it a little bit.
Mhm.
What they do is if you don't have to be a Democrat to vote in the Democrat or a Republican to vote in the Republican,
They skew
so
the
then
results.
a Democrat will go in the Republican and vote for the weakest candidate. And the way politics are in New York City, for anyone that's been involved in campaigns, it's riddled with that kind of stuff. I was gonna use another word. It's
Yeah.
riddled with that kind of
Stuff
stuff.
happens.
If people were really voting because of civic engagement, it would be wonderful. It doesn't even seem to be encouraged in this city, unfortunately.
I think that's one of the reasons we have closed primaries now.
It is.
A
That's why we do
procedural
it.
issue, just really quickly,
Sure.
I'm sorry. How much longer can we stay?
A half
Because,
hour.
All right, we're gonna be losing our minute taker soon,
Okay,
okay?
so
So
should
I
we
need
move on in
someone,
this
we need to
question?
move on,
Yeah.
or somebody needs to take over.
Is there anything, do we want to, by the way, do you want to make a comment on the policy procurement, or should we? The problems with the not-for-profits and the current process.
Fix
In
it.
5
Oh my
minutes or
God.
less, right? Yeah.
Is there a setting on Zoom where you could have it take the minutes?
Have a what?
No, because it's a webinar. Only a meeting can take minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm afraid of that, because somebody
Of
on
the
my staff
AI?
did that, and the
Yeah,
AI
it's a
started popping
problem.
up in all our meetings on its own.
Mm.
It was weird. So,
I have a former employee's AI that pops up in our meetings.
all right, so are we gonna try to wrap up? But how much more time do you have?
Well, half an hour, I think, right?
About
We have a half
5?
an hour. We
So
talk
then I
about
need someone
steps.
to volunteer to continue taking the minutes. Come on, don't everybody jump up at once.
Or if you guys could tell me also just, because this is recorded, so I can add in the minutes after this, but just
Oh,
the
okay.
attendance, someone just needs to
Sure.
tell me if anybody leaves other than me.
We'll
Does
do
that
that.
work?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
And then you'll
Thank you, guys.
review the rest of
Yes.
the half
Yes.
hour
Yeah.
and
Great,
finish it out, you sure?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Thank you for doing
No,
that.
thank you.
thanks.
Okay,
So either we deal with that one or we go back and start with do you want to do the district needs now, or do we want to try and finish
well,
a
are
lot
we
of this
done
off?
with this piece? Are we clear? Is there any more discussion that we wanna have? Does anybody have any more questions? Or anything that they'd like us to consider? And then if not, then I think what we should talk about is the process for determining our resolution
Right.
moving
Okay.
forward,
I
right?
use this.
No, I don't need to use it. Everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't wanna use it.
I'm
too
worried
loud.
about the people who on
Oh,
the,
they can hear me, right? I'm sure. And I think there was a question. Somebody.
I thought that was my mistake. It was an audio thing. I thought Sherry had a question, but
Okay,
she's no
okay.
longer.
All right.
Sure. Just
So-
throws them
so-
away.
So maybe we can get some guidance from you, George, if you have a minute, or anybody else who knows, right, for us to submit our resolution. So when we've done previous processes, there's been forms, this is really just a resolution, it's just for the hearing, it's basically our testimony, is that correct?
And we're submitting it
And we're
as written
submitting it, right?
testimony.
And so what is the timeline? When does our testimony have to be, what's the deadline?
July.
Well,
7th,
so we
right?
have one more committee. We're
Right,
voting at the full board. We
Mhm.
must vote at the full board because it has to be submitted before the next full board.
But when do they need it by?
July
When does
7th, I think.
who they?
July seventh, the city, the
Well,
mayoral?
but it's a few days later for the mayors. It's,
Okay,
but it's in July. But we would be submitting it after the full board vote.
after full board next,
This month. After, we'll be submitting it after the full board because we're not gonna have an opportunity to vote again.
All right, so I think that what we've gotta probably do is draft put together a
Yeah,
draft. Covering all the points, looking at the minutes as much as we can, if we can get them back in time. Right, cause Ariana now also has to look at them. I think the minutes, cause I asked her to take, good notes and she does. So, and then we can start with that at the meeting. That's what we'll have to circulate. We'll clean
Right.
that up as much as possible, cause it's, limited. And then we can circulate that before the meeting for folks to look at.
We can, but it should stay within, the
Yes.
people should not respond. They
Right.
should come
Yes.
prepared. And they shouldn't send it out to the world
Right.
because once it's out there, it becomes.
So
a
how about we
permanent
say
bylaw.
this? We're gonna do everything in our power to get you that resolution before the meeting, so that you can review it. And you can come prepared with your points that you would like us to consider. But we are asking you, based on both the sunshine laws, not to respond. We'll make it BCC anyway, and not to share the resolution with anyone because it's not the resolution.
Yeah,
It's
it'll
just a
get
draft.
published in the media and it'll be
Okay.
that forever.
And then if anybody, I can work with a person or two maybe, but we can't, more than that, it's like a meeting. So,
But if they want to, they can send stuff to the two of you.
that's right,
But you can't have a quorum
right, so that's the other
discussing it
piece
or,
then.
or on the email.
Right, if you want us to consider in the draft that we're presenting before we send it to everyone, if you're that prepared, which, bless your souls and your hearts if you are.
in
If
fact,
you're
you can
that
write the whole.
prepared, send it to us, okay? Please, and I would say, it would be helpful to have it by Friday, because our land use meeting is next Tuesday.
Yeah,
And then, we can try to incorporate it and get it to folks, I mean, even if we do it in advance, I can't anticipate. I don't think that we're gonna be able to get it any sooner than maybe Monday. Give you a whole day and a half maybe to look at it. And I apologize for that, but we all have really busy schedules, so. So any help that anyone wants to give is totally welcome, right? That's kind of like, we're really making a plea. All right, so are we good? And we can move on to district needs?
So,
Can we also can I also get?
We'll
a
give
copy
them
of
these
that?
notes too, or very
you
good.
what?
Can I also get a copy of that?
Yeah.
I'll have it on the website by tomorrow.
This
okay,
too?
great.
This-
Oh, this,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That,
We can send this out to the committee.
Please do, thank
okay,
you.
yeah, please.
Actually, if you're doing that, would you mind attaching the link to the presentation too, so we don't have to go back
No,
onto the website?
you can do that, but the presentation will also be attached to
That
the
would be great,
agenda
thank you
items,
so much for that.
which everybody should know. Please always look at the agenda before meetings because we try and put information on. For the district needs, at the last meeting, we went through everything. John, thank you. I read John's minutes before coming tonight. Certain people were gonna do certain research, look up things, rewrite things. And the minutes said that they were supposed to send them to me. Nobody sent me anything. What?
I sent.
You did. I'm sorry, you did. I read that.
Only
I'm
one
sorry.
person sent.
One person did.
I
And
thought we were talking about this next week, for what it's worth. I apologize.
I was like, don't put me in that.
But still, I'm gonna say we can't do everything last minute. And I know it's a lot going on all at once, and it's, all I can say is we'll get through the month. So I actually don't remember who was gonna do what, and that information wasn't captured. When I got your email, I forgot that was because of the district needs. So do people know that they were going to look up things? I don't know if people still have that information. I don't know.
You mean what was in the minutes?
Well, the minutes didn't capture the name, so you
I
have.
have a draft email to you that I just have not sent yet.
Okay, but
because,
you know, but at least,
Yep.
so what section is that?
I was going to pull a whole bunch of like background data to update our, like the boilerplate language, and then, there was, there's a section about the like rate of affordable housing production. I have to look back. I drafted it like last week and I just haven't finished
But
it.
you got the stats
Yep,
to
mhm.
update that. Okay, because we were also, I mean, Orin was also going through it to try and see how to just streamline and bullet points. But we'll stop that until we get more information. And I bet no one told Damaris that we decided that she would do the night shift part.
That wasn't even in the minutes.
No, it wasn't. I
They
said
didn't
no
want
one
you to
told
know
me.
ahead of time.
Okay, all right.
But I just remembered it. I remember
Okay.
saying, okay, who's gonna know the most about that?
Yes, I will, I'm not, yes.
So given all that information, we really, what we have is, we have some comments that Orin did going through it. Do you want to look at that? Do you want to put that?
So I got minutes here that say, I mean, I don't know if you're talking about other assignments that weren't included in here. But like, I have here that Val Orselli was gonna respond with some updates around
Oh, someone was
CLC.
gonna contact you.
Right?
No, someone
Oh, it
was
says
going to,
follow up with Val,
But
oh,
who's
so that's
gonna-
what you're saying.
what?
Nobody agreed to do the work.
But I've already done that.
Okay, and no, you didn't get, yeah, all right, well, there we go. Never
That
mind.
was it.
That was it.
Orin, do you want to put what you did on here and just?
Can, but
Oh, that wasn't the comments. The district needs statement, that's.
yeah, I have it, but if we're gonna, sounds like we're gonna rewrite it. Almost.
So you're saying that the comments really aren't
comment.
pertinent. So
So let's talk about the process for moving forward, so we don't find ourselves in this boat again.
Do charter people need to stay for this part? Or
What?
Can the charter task force folks?
Can we
leave,
go?
or do we have to stay for this part?
they don't have to.
Oh my God, it's.
But we can
Sorry.
go.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing.
I love you
Okay.
guys.
So
I'll see
tired.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Wow.
We have a meeting tomorrow.
Wow, wow.
I
You know,
love-
we get a badge.
So,
So wait a minute, wait a minute.
Fascinating what you
Wait,
guys do.
guys,
I'm
guys.
just tired and I wanna.
Somebody should capture the attendance at the end of the meeting.
Yes, so let's do that.
Who has the roll?
Yeah, if you guys leave, well, are we, then they're not here for the last roll call, how does that
No,
work?
this is the last, there was only one joint item.
Okay.
So we have 4 out of 5 members.
Perfect.
But who's doing the minutes?
It's recorded.
It's recorded and we're taking
Ariadne's gonna-
attendance.
So
I
we might as well not have
Who has
separate
the
minutes.
attendance?
But
We don't
Yeah, it
have
should-
separate
it should be
minutes,
the
we
same.
only have 1 minute.
that's right, but we'll have separate attendance.
Wait, we should
Well-
just say Catherine, Sean.
Right,
Nancy,
right.
It's 4 out of
And
5.
Michael are leaving.
Right,
Yeah, 4 out of 5.
so do we wanna just say our names or just 4 out of 5? I mean, Catherine Freed's here.
Nancy Collins leaving.
Michael Lario.
Sean Garcia's leaving.
I got 4
Alright.
of you.
That's it.
That's it.
Don't
There's one
forget,
out.
look.
Ship jumper.
This is so fascinating. I love it. I love this for you guys.
Okay, all right, thank you, all right.
Bye, have a good
All right,
night.
Agnes, let's finish up, it's really just the 3 of us.
I have my notes like right here.
Okay, please.
I will
Please say-
finalize this and get that over to you. I have
That's
here,
what you were gonna look up, or is that all everybody's assignments and all
No,
That
that?
was
these
his
are-
assignment.
this is my assignment.
Okay.
So, there was a point that I made and, well, we discussed about how, in the boilerplate, we should be adding a section about, like we have a section about senior housing. There's a section, we talked about adding a section about young people specifically and rent burden there. And then a desire to look into the state of vacancy rates across different housing typologies, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. You know, we have this situation in CB3 where there's a lot of family-sized housing units that get occupied by a lot of young people because 3 young people salaries is able to outbid 2 parents with childcare on their balance sheet. So there's a lot of interplay there.
Wait, Damaris, isn't Pratt looking into that?
Well, I think that's probably, where we would be getting some updated stats from,
Yeah,
minutes
so our
and
next meeting is what, next week she wants
it's
to
on
do it.
Tuesday.
What?
No, isn't it on
No,
tomorrow?
she emailed and said it's too soon, we should
Oh,
reschedule for
okay,
next.
I got my.
So we're getting those next week.
Okay,
Okay, I was
so it might
planning
be
to,
after this then.
I was planning to the extent that some of this data is publicly available
Okay.
and like the number crunching has already been done by like the Furman Center or whatever, I was gonna pull those updated numbers. However, to your point exactly, Susan, there is an additional layer of granularity. Like if I wanted to find the vacancy rate by one bedrooms in CB3, I'd probably have to spend an hour or two finding the data, narrowing it, et cetera. And since we've kind of hired them to do the job, that was gonna be Fred's
Okay.
job.
So
But I was gonna write the language and then leave the blanks.
All right, okay, that, of what we would ask them to go look for.
Yes,
Please do that, yes,
and
that's great.
then there was a point
You
here
heard that,
about,
Susan, you understood that?
No, I didn't hear.
That what Campbell is saying is that he's writing the language, so he has data, but where the data had to be more granular. Where since we have Pratt and they're doing stuff, he would write it and leave it blank, and then we would ask them to see if
And
they
we'll see
can.
what they're able to come
And
up
we'll
with.
see what they're able to find.
Yeah, there's no
was-
guarantee what they're coming
Right.
up with.
for the stuff that we have here, 26% of residents live below the poverty line. I was gonna look up and see, has that number changed? And then to the extent that like we wanna look into what the vacancy rates are in a studio, one bedroom, et cetera, I was gonna write the language
Okay,
and then leave the blank for the percentage because I only got a B+ in data analysis in planning school.
So I mean, I'm afraid that you're duplicating a lot because like the number of people below the poverty line, we have all that in the introduction.
Yeah, no, I
I mean, the
was just gonna
introduction to
pull
the,
I was just gonna have people gotten these updated numbers yet?
yeah, we have the Furman report,
And that's current to this year.
just came out last week.
All right, then, we don't need to do anything
We
more.
also have a lot of that on the maps that I sent around to the chairs. So we also are working with a demographer.
Uh-huh.
And I think that, I think what the last map we got, we can actually put on the website. So that everyone can have it. It's not complete yet, but has a lot of information. So yes, we have, somebody with real expertise who's been doing that.
Is there any way, this is an aside, is there any way that members of the land use committee can like participate or engage with those efforts more beyond like our monthly meetings?
Well, to be honest, she's almost done. It's something we've been doing through the exec and just sending to the chairs who should be, if you have input, I'd say, give it to Damaris.
Okay,
in the future, I guess that could be a discussion though, if we take on other projects, if people wanna volunteer.
Yep.
And help.
And it depends on the project. Like we have a fellow working with us and they should come
Right.
to the meeting.
Right.
That,
Oh,
what?
somebody raised their hand.
Okay, that
Ooh,
is
Tanya Bates,
Tanya.
LLC.
Okay, you can unmute and talk.
I just wanted to confirm my presence and also to inquire where would I be able to review this meeting? I'm looking online and I'm not seeing the last meeting. So I'm just learning how to navigate these meetings when I'm unable to be present physically. If you can guide me with that, I would appreciate it.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding. Do you mean, a meeting that we're referring to or you mean the other part of today's meeting?
I wanted to reflect back on this meeting, and I was going online to see if other meetings were posted on the
Okay.
website. So I wasn't sure where to find these meetings in the event that, let's say, if I come in late or if I missed something,
Yeah.
let's say because a call came in. I wanted to be able to, go ahead.
That's a good question. Thank you for asking it.
If you look on here, it says a video archive. Not all meetings are on Zoom, but all the meetings such as this one are posted on the website the next day.
Can you see that screen, Tanya?
No, I just see the space.
All right, so there should be, I thought we were sharing it, but if you go to the Manhattan, to the CB3 website, and you go to the menu on top and you
It's
go
okay.
to minutes, then you will see a meeting video archive. And in there, it will have different.
No,
That's not it?
No, that's
There-
not
there-
it. Go back to the homepage. No, go back to
Give
the
us a minute. I'm
homepage.
sorry, Tanya, before I continue to misdirect you.
Okay, just go on the homepage,
Okay.
move up,
Right, there you go.
move up. So we're on the right-hand side, where it says
She doesn't see that
CV3
screen.
meeting
That's the thing.
video.
think she should be able to see it.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see what
All
you're
right.
doing.
Okay, so if you go on our homepage on the right-hand column, at the bottom of what you're looking at now, all of the Zoom meetings are posted the next day on the website. If they're not on Zoom, we don't have a recording. And the minutes are just that we take corporate minutes, so it may be 3 sentences that they discuss the district needs.
Okay.
But a lot of the meetings are, are recorded, so it's worth watching on that.
Right, I just wanted to be able to reflect back on the conversations that have been had, because as you know, I am new to this experience, so I just wanted to be able to get a feel of, what is transpiring, what conversations have been had, to become more familiar and clear as to the direction of certain events
Sure.
or other.
So feel free also to shoot me an email in the office to say what you're looking for, and I'll let you know where to find it.
Okay, I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Where were? All right,
let's get
so
out.
we were at the part.
don't-
I don't
we don't-
remember where we were.
I was just gonna run through what I was gonna be
Please do.
sending over.
Yeah, just
So I will hold off on updating those statistics since we already have them. The language that I was going to include was, as I said, about the young people and about those vacancy rates broken down by unit size. The other thing that I think we ought to include, and I will admit that I wasn't able to find this data myself, is to your point earlier, Damaris, about like permanent affordability versus time limited affordability. When those contracts, like, it was 40 years and we signed that deal in 1985, that like apartment building needs to come up for refinancing, and it needs like a capital allocation to be able to maintain that restricted status. So, like one thing that we should be keeping track of is how many units are going to come up and in this period.
Would that be
As I say,
similar?
we can't do that in the district needs. It's, if you want to track it, the committee wants to track it, that's one thing. But that's not something you would put in the district needs. These are our main, for the whole holistic main unmet needs that we need to deal with.
Well, so wait, let me just ask a question though. Would that be similar to like the expiration of the J51 tax credits? When all those tax credit programs were expiring and then all those buildings and their affordability, was that question?
So I might have to defer to Molly here because she knows a lot more about this than I do, but like, there's a whole bunch of different financing mechanisms that the city and the state can confer to a development. And specifically at like the city level, the city can refinance, these properties to, give them cheap access to credit and enable them to maintain their affordable status. As it concerns state level tax breaks, I don't know if the city has any like ability to intervene and preserve that affordability for longer than the initial tax break might have existed. But, I was mostly thinking about a saga in Red Hook that happened last year where there was like a 400 unit affordable housing complex that had its affordability provisions expiring. The council member and the city went back and forth for months on end, and ultimately the city stepped in to like set aside a portion of its like bond proceeds to enable this development to have almost free access to refinancing to be able to preserve the current affordability restrictions. To the extent that we have a whole bunch of similar, kind of like ticking time bombs, if you will, I think it's something that, maybe it's outside of the district needs statement we're keeping track of, but, like it's something that I think ought to be indicating to the city that like, we don't have the resources to keep track of this. The Department of Finance does. Like, we want to be proactive in preparing for the expiration of these provisions
Yeah.
so that we can not get blindsided, you know, because no one's thinking about the 40-year ticking time bomb, even if there might be 2.5 years left on it, because the folks who sign those agreements are.
So just to add to that, I mean, I don't know if this is where and how, but in some ways, it makes a lot of sense to think about but the financial impact or what our need could be around that, because there aren't that many, it's not like we have all these sites where we can develop new housing. So if we lose some of the affordable housing, if there's a lot of it in our neighborhood, which is, I think, the question, if we lose some of that housing, we don't have really at this point a way to recapture that housing. So I don't know if can you just really quickly give us a reminder about this committee's recommendations last year, if you remember looking at the district needs, what were some of the things that we weighed in on? So that we're also clear too, a little bit in terms of the range or the broadness of our recommendations?
Well, I mean, I have,
Or where to direct them, because I think
So-
this is a really good issue.
so one of the things, I says, we were also talked last month, some of the things that were brought up are very good questions for our budget consultations when we meet with them. So there were some, and again, I don't remember who and what they were, but people were gonna formulate questions, which they don't have to do as a committee. They could send them to Damaris, send them to me. It's not taking a position, it's just asking a question.
Mhm.
And we put the 12 boards put the agendas together for each of the agencies. So some of this might be questions like, what are the plans? I think for HPD, what are the plans to deal with this? It
I
might,
think though, what Campbell's, I think what he's saying too is, as a district need, we need the resources to be able to capture this, to be notified. Or some, I mean, am I wrong?
I mean, I think
Or
that
are you
this,
just thinking about it as a financial impact that it'll
my,
have on the district should this happen? Because that would be, that's really an important issue, but I don't know that it meets the same criteria.
I don't think right now that's a district need, but I think what I think people are saying is that we need to deal with it. And again, I do think we can start by formulating some questions, like, is anyone doing this? Is there a budget for resources? How would, what would those resources look like? I mean, you can ask a number of questions and different ways to get at that information.
I think maybe just including the narrative of the state here, how many units will expire, their regulatory agreement will expire in 5, 10, 15 years. That also shows the urgency. That data is available on Department of Finance website. The tax bill have for each building, each unit.
There you go.
Like how.
the data is there. It's just a question of being able to scrape it. Like, I was just like, as I said, I was a subpar student in this component
But
of,
it's-
and like, I know, like, I'm almost positive that there is someone at the Department of Finance keeping track of this. And I was of two minds of this when I realized that I couldn't pull the data myself. It was either, to your point, Susan, saying like, just requesting this data outside of the district needs process, or including some language like how we have in the NYCHA capital improvements and repairs section, where it's like, to the extent possible, the city should be accounting for how many regulatory agreements securing affordable housing will expire on these different time bands. And again, to the extent possible, the city should be proactively planning in consultation with CB3, something like that, to
I think that's a big, I don't mean to cut you off, but I
Mhm.
really do think that's one of the biggest ways right now. We're not developing really.
Yep.
And so as we're thinking about affordability, we're
Mhm.
thinking about unit size, family income, and we're thinking about that, really knowing where all of our housing stands.
Yep.
Is a matter of urgency for
Mhm.
us in some way, Susan.
So it's under it's under the preserve affordable housing.
Yes.
And
So
again,
then,
I think.
what does it say there?
Says, this is a whole section is
We
build
don't
and
have-
preserve affordable housing.
Yep.
We've always had that. Yeah, but I think we do need to, ask questions, some specific questions to find out what the agencies are doing or not doing. I was just looking at the head.
Oh. See, but this is build and preserve, right? But what do we say about preserving? So maybe we could look at that and see if there's anything that we might want to change.
Yep.
In this section,
Mhm.
that could maybe update it or to, include
Mhm.
that. That would be the section for us to, can you take a look at that?
Yeah, I agree with Susan. I think that it ought to go to, if it does go in here, under build and preserve affordable housing. And, I'm reading this, and frankly, I'm skimming it because I'm looking at it just now. I don't know if we talk about preservation specifically beyond the headline.
So maybe we want to divide that into build
Mm-hmm.
and then a
Yep.
preserve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I can work on some draft language on that,
Okay.
and to the extent that this is actually kind of a nice segue here. We spoke about this, gosh, maybe the last time we were here, or maybe when we were at the Chinatown YMCA downtown. We spoke about like different initiatives that the CB might take on, as we're sort of in this like lull period post. Yep, and to your point, Damaris, like we're not building very much in CB3. We have, very few, if any, vacant lots. And the marquee lot is, both of them are being talked about actively for development. I wonder whether or not we might want to include in the district needs statement a request for DCP to engage with us directly on like potential opportunities to be building more housing. We spoke in that meeting where we we're talking about goals about potentially a rezoning on Bowery. That to me is the corridor that's the messiest in the district. We have a lot of messy corridors, but I think that one takes the cake for me. And including it in our district needs statement that we want to, have like a comprehensive vision for Bowery that includes housing and transportation improvements, because God, that corridor is a mess to cross. That was one thing I wanted to run by.
Are you saying specifically for the Bowery?
Yeah, I mean,
So
I've
what
been,
about that though? Let me just stop you there, cause I have a question about that. Wouldn't that take a position on our part to request something so specific?
We just need to call them up and say, will you come to a meeting and discuss this with us?
oh, then can we do that?
Sure.
I would.
You don't
love-
have to, that's,
Well, this is what
meeting
I
with
was-
an agency isn't a district meeting,
Yeah.
just meet with them.
Yeah, I think, a few months back, I had said I wanted ideas from folks. For things that we can
We gotta go.
address, and we have to go, so the things that we can address at this meeting. I didn't get very many, I only got 2, and both of them we followed up on.
Mhm.
So I'm happy for us to be thinking big
Yep.
now about who we wanna have come, that kind
I
of
want you
stuff.
to
I gotta
roll
do the
call.
roll call, 'cause
Of
we
course,
gotta
yep,
go. So just, are there any other big
No,
pieces?
nope,
All right, so are we clear, we're a little clearer, right?
yes. Mhm.
We're gonna look at this, you're gonna work on those pieces, we're gonna figure out the other pieces, who was assigned to them. Somehow, I'll call John, we'll talk tomorrow or something, okay? And we'll move on what we can move.
Yeah, the CLT, since I see Bell all the time, I already asked. her.
Okay, all right, so Damaris Reyes, here.
I have a question.
Someone have-
Go
Okay,
ahead,
So
go ahead.
we can take the
We
question,
have
we
to
have
leave.
only 2 minutes,
We
okay?
don't even have 2 minutes.
Please go ahead.
Okay, I was just interested in terms of affordability. Is this something that's linked to an individual's employability? So is it more or less
That's a
income
big
versus
building company question.
affordability, or is this more about space?
Oh, you said is affordability linked to someone's income, right?
Right,
Yeah,
their
affordability
employability.
is, yeah, so I think, that's a good question. It's a loaded one. People have a lot of ideas and opinions about what the term affordability means. In this city, though, for the most part, it's usually housing that is capped at 30% of your income. So that's the portion that you would pay. But there are different ways that housing can be affordable that you can combine with that. But when we say affordability, it is based on usually someone's income, and there are different ranges. So when I tell you that there are a lot, I mean, there's like, what is it really affordable? Is it very low? Is it low? Is it middle income? Is it market rate? You know, is it luxury? All of those are different bands. So, but that's the best explanation I could give you right now. We have to cap this meeting out and we have to adjourn. I'm sorry that we don't have more time to dig in. Come back next month or send me an email.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you. All right, so Damaris is here.
yes.
Okay, John Fout. No. Ariana Chua. No. Alistair, economic, Economakis. Did I say it
Not
right?
here. Yes.
Herman Hewitt,
Not here.
Trevor Holland, Michelle Cooper Smith, Molly Liu, Campbell Munn.
Here.
Jaylene Rodriguez, Sandra Struthers, Steve Herrick, Megan Joy, and Anisha Stevens. Okay, just us three. This is
Okay.
Ritual, so,
I'm ending the meeting.
yes, thank you.